Hello, my sister. Welcome to the UNMASK series. This is your very first lesson in this series. And today we're going to be talking about the masks we were taught to wear. And this is a part of phase one, the performance of survival. Feel free to reference the UNMASK playbook, phase one, as well as the first three chapters, and reciprocity eludes me. I am so honored that you are here. That means that you are wanting to be coached and empowered to begin to peel back the layers that you have put on in order to survive in this world. I want to begin by first affirming something simple but sacred. You were never created to live behind a mask. That's facts. We were not created to live in a facade. We were not created to costume up every single day and hide who we truly are from the world. We were not created to dance to the beat of the world's drum. In Romans 12 and 2, it says clearly, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So I want us to consider something as we move through this training. The masks that we were taught to wear were given to us by society, were given to us by our culture, and are absolutely positively carnal in nature, not spiritual. For with the Lord and his will, we are not required to mask up in order to be acceptable. Now, granted, religion wise, there are many that believe you have to mask up. But what God really cares about is not how you're looking, but how your heart is. And how many of you know that the Bible says that is out of our heart that our mouth speaks? So I want you all to take that into consideration as we are moving through this training series. So let's go ahead and let's jump right in. All right, I want you to say it with me. You were not created to perform strength. You were created to embody wholeness. How do we know this, my friend? Because, again, going back to the one that created all of us, his word says that he is made strong in our weakness. So it is only in our weakness that he is able to show up and be our strength. And yeah, we were created to embody wholeness. How do we know? Because right there in the very first chapter of the love book that we were given by the Lord, the Bible, it tells us that we were made in his image and after his likeness. And that is what determines our sovereignty and our dominion over every other creature on this planet. So, my sister, you were not created to be strong. You were created to live and to live with a purpose, to love fearlessly. You were created to take the seeds that were already sown into you in your creation and bring that fruit out into the earth, to touch lives, to touch communities, to touch generations to come. That is who you are. And you were created to be whole. You were created to be healed. Okay? So I want you to think about this concept of performance, right? Because we're talking about the performance of survival. Are we pretending and make believing survival? Most likely not, especially if you are a Black woman or a part of a marginalized community. Survival is very, very real. However, we can choose to show up different. And as we'll talk about, we can choose to have a different mindset and perspective, which will cause us to move different, which will cause different outcomes, different reciprocity. And we are not to do that perfectly, for we are imperfectly flawed creatures. Maybe I shouldn't say creatures, perfectly flawed beings. Okay. And we are not intended to be strong at all times. We are not intended to be the strongest. Because let's think about this. While we may see people with amazing physical strength, and some of us have even had to have unwarranted mental and emotional strength at times, but doing that on a long term, every single day for the rest of our lives is unlikely. Our bodies were not built to function that way. And that's where realities like uh, the detriment of um, the detriment of stress and how it affects us even more. Like in Mary Frances Winter's book, Black Fatigue, as she talks about the different layers of racism and discrimination that create fatigue and exhaustion in Black people's lives. That's what we're talking about. And wholeness is embracing all parts of ourselves, good, bad, ugly, beautiful, all of us, okay? And allowing there to be, as Dr. Cindy Trim likes to term it, congruency between who we are on the inside, who we see in the mirror, who we wake up and go to bed to, and who the world sees. And I personally have made an endeavor ever since the very first time I came across her book, The 40-Day Soul Fast, that I wanted to be congruent because I was wearing a different mask for church, a different mask for my family, a different mask for friends, and a different mask for work. Can I tell you how exhausting and how much I burned out on the regular because of this? So I want you all to keep that in mind as we move through this teaching. Now, because you are here, I will remind you that my whole foundation of everything that I do is about transforming us by the renewing of our minds. And we are doing this pertaining to culture, faith, and justice. So we are going to always incorporate faith into these conversations as well as uh, wisdom from our culture, even some of the knowledge that we can glean from our society, our education, our psychology, sociology, so forth, and also how that affects people like us in marginalized communities. Where is there justice and injustice, and what we can do to be a part of the solution? So everything that I do will be based off of those premises, okay? All right, so here we are integrating faith and healing into this conversation, grounding it with Mark 5:25 through 34. And this is a story of the woman with the issue of blood. The woman with the issue of blood didn't wear a mask. She came raw, unfiltered, and uninvited. But Jesus didn't scold her. He affirmed her. He called her daughter. And that's what this journey is about, letting faith lead us out of performance and into presence. So I want you to think about that. This woman was suffering with this issue for 12 years, the issue of blood. 12 years, y'all. That's over a decade of bleeding out and being treated like a castaway. But what did she do? She allowed her need to be greater than any desire to be acceptable, okay? She wasn't out there trying to hide who she is. Okay. Now, granted, she did try to hide her situation, I'm sure, but how much could she? Not much. If you're just bleeding consistently for 12 years, y'all, it just sounds awful. She was sick and tired of being sick and tired. So I could see how she came to this space of bold action and actually reached out despite cultural barriers, right? How many times in the gospel where people try to shut people up that actually wanted their healing? That's how we have to be. We don't have to pretend to be strong anymore. We can be seen. We can be seen, sis. And we don't have to put on airs in order to be seen because we can be seen first by the Lord that loves us more than anyone ever will, the one that is forever the same, yesterday, today, and forever, the one who is unchanging, faithful as promised, our Jesus. Okay? So I want you to keep that in mind as you're developing your mindset and your perspective on what masks are required and which ones you want to keep and which ones need to be stripped away. And to be honest with you, they should all be stripped away so that we have a congruency about who we are at home is the same person that we are in public. That's the really ultimately the goal, that we no longer have to shield the world from who we really are. Let's talk about what a mask actually is. When I initially did my speech on this topic of unmasking, I started the speech by wearing 3 different types of masks. I had on a neck gaiter pulled over my nose. I had on a masquerade mask covering my eyes. And then I had on a COVID mask. And one by one, I stripped those masks away to talk about how I had put on layers for survival. And what did they look like? They looked like pretending to be happy and in a good space and pretending to be fine instead of expressing how I really was feeling or what I was really dealing with. Not needing nobody, pretending that being my own independent woman was all that I needed and I didn't care about anyone else. When in reality, deep down, that was not true. So if you're following me here, this is what a mask looks like. Modern day performance traps are basically showing us that we're wearing a mask. For instance, are you an overachiever at work? Are you emotionally available for everyone, but you are also unsupported? Are you endeavoring every single day to be the perfect mother and partner? Are you the picture of faith and holiness, yet with no room for grief and struggle? Is people pleasing something that you struggle with regularly? Are you aspiring to perfection, thinking that what you do is what makes you acceptable? Do you suppress your voice in whatever context or situation in order to avoid conflict? Are you an overachiever, trying to go above and beyond so that no one can say anything negative? Are you hyper independent, never asking for help, putting on a persona or a mask that you don't need anybody? You are a one-woman show. I want you all to think about this because all of us, in some way, have been thrust into a necessity to wear some of these masks. And specifically as Black women, why? Let's move on to the next slide and see. Now, speaking from a cultural perspective or societal perspective, I always go back to this concept of the crooked room found in Sister Citizen by Melissa Harris Perry. And in that book, she says, Black women are often caught in a trap of misrecognition where who they are is distorted by stereotypes and their real feelings, fears, and identities are rendered invisible. Why? Because we are required to fit into one of these stereotypes. Either we have no issues because we are super strong, we do not get tired, we do not have to be over emotional, we are very stoic and responsible. Or we are self sacrificing, caring for others at our own expense, being the mom of every situation, the work mom and the school mom and the mom of the friend group, mothering our men, not just our children, nurturing everybody except ourselves. Or we are hypersexualized and shamed, considered invalid because we own our body and our voice. We are uncontrollable, and that's a bad thing. Just because this is who the world tries to tell us that we are, that doesn't mean that we have to believe it. This falls into those, what we would call limiting beliefs that, or lies that we tend to internalize. But I ask you the question that W.E. Du Bois asked in Soul of Black Folk. How does it feel to be a problem? Because when you think of this context here, we are considered a problem if we are not strong without complaint, if we are not nurturing and caring for others with no complaint, and definitely not daring to do so for ourselves. Or we are easily sexualized, we are easily controlled and manipulated, or controlling and manipulating, right? That means that we're a problem to society. But what really means, y'all, is that we are being put into a box that God never intended for us. And we are so powerful beyond measure. But it's about how we see ourselves, how we see Him. It's about that mindset, establishing it. And it's about that perspective that comes from our mindset. Okay. And we're going to talk about that more in depth later. This concept of free will versus God's will and mindset versus perspective. But for now, I just want you to remember you do not have to be who they say that you are. And it's never too late to strip away those stereotypes, those expectations, those obligations, those masks that require us to be what others are comfortable with us being. These masks have never been about authenticity. They were simply about survival under a gaze that refused to see us as human. But, my sister, that survival script does not have to be our inheritance, nor does it have to be for our daughters, our nieces, any of the women in our lives moving forward. Wholeness is congruency is, authenticity is, liberation is. Now, let's talk about what masking looks like in modern day. Real quick, when I initially gave this speech, we talked about masking and unmasking, and I used examples of superheroes because it was a cosplay themed event. But what I want to bring to you all today is this reality that one thing that draws us to superheroes is that they are, in fact, flawed human beings under the surface, just like we are, and that they are wearing masks to hide their own truth, not just from the world, but most of the time, our favorite superheroes are also hiding the truth from themselves. And I think that we do the same thing. Here are some examples of modern masking here, but I want you all to read that and listen to me at the same time. When I was wearing those three masks, I already kind of mentioned that to you a little bit. Those masks, those layers that I began to strip off were focused on performances such as stay back, stay safe, stay quiet. That was the COVID mask, making it easier to hide from the harsh world around us, easier to stay invisible, easier to isolate and stay away from people and keep a distance. The other mask, the neck gaiter mask over my nose, that one was the I've got this, I don't need nobody mask. I've been wearing that one since I was a teen mom and wife in the 90s. It protected me, but it also isolated me. And one of the hardest truths was, as much as I thought I had it, y'all, I really didn't. My kids, my daughters ask me nowadays how I did it. And my response is always the same. I had to. What is that, sis? That's survival. And you probably can relate to that. The final one was the masquerade mask over my eyes. And that was the smile to perform, switching roles, swapping hats, staying perfect, staying busy mask. That was my I've got it all together mask. Listen, this mask was validation seeking, approval needing, acceptance pleading. But you know what I learned? While I was out here trying to play dress up, y'all, performing for the masses, I couldn't heal. And then it wasn't fun anymore because I realized how dangerous it was for the inner me, the one who actually tends to seep out, y'all. Okay? When I say seep out, I mean you can wear a mask all day long. But again, the Bible says, out of the heart, our mouth speaks. Also, the Bible says that our issues of life flow from our heart. If we're too busy trying to avoid or be in denial about what's really going on in there, y'all, these masks are not going to be as effective as we'd like them to be. Now that we've started to identify the lies, let's talk about truth for a moment here. And the truth looks like this. We were taught how to be what was needed from others as opposed to starting from a space of what was needed for us first. It's kind of like that concept of on an airplane, right? Where they tell you to put your own mask on first before putting it on a child or anyone else. Many of us have been taught that way. Now, granted, some of us have received the revelation later in life and were able to reproduce women into this world or girls that have a better understanding of this concept of self sacrifice, right? My point is this: Self sacrifice of women, shrinking of women, the dimming of our lights in this world. This is all learned behavior. These are all patterns that were established early in life, if not an actual conversation that was had most of the time, it's usually by watching the behaviors around us. How did our mothers function in the world? Our grandmothers, our sisters, our aunts. How did they function in this world? Our neighbors, people that we went to church with, people that our parents' friends, family friends. We established a pattern of living from watching people in our youth. And then we became older and we took those things that we learned. And sometimes we decided to try to veer from that path and find a different way. And experience taught us maybe not to wear that mask that we saw emulated to us, but a whole different one, right? Because we all handle things differently, we all perceive things differently. The key is this, y'all. In our moment of truth right now, not only do we acknowledge that we have, in fact, learned these patterns from somewhere or someone, but that doesn't mean that that has to be the way that we continue to live our lives. Recognizing, becoming aware of the positive or negative connotations of that learned behavior, okay? Just because you learned something doesn't mean that you can't learn something else. And that is what it looks like to renew our minds. We have to unlearn and relearn. We have to deconstruct and rebuild. That's life, okay? That's the existence of humanity. And just like we do that in a natural sense out in the world, we need to do that within ourselves. And I would argue that we need to do that seasonally, right? Maybe every quarter is not realistic, but once a year. Typically for me, I do that at the end of the year because once we get into November, it's like everything in me starts to shut down and I just don't have anything left for the outside world. And I use that time to prepare for what's coming in the new year. I use that as time to reflect on what's been done and happened and taken place in the present year. And I use that as time to see what I need to unlearn and reconstruct. Okay. So I encourage you to do the same. And once we begin to acknowledge those learned behaviors and recognize the good or bads of them, then we can truly see transformation in ourselves, which in turn gives us transformation in life. Okay? That's how that process should work. Granted, we like to fight against the things that are good and helpful for us. So let's normalize, sis, and I'm speaking to myself too, that we will truly begin to pay more attention, truly begin to see truth for what it really is, and speak truth to power, not just in the world around us, but for ourselves. So, just like anything else, there has to be an intention and an effort put in order to begin to see a difference. We're not just talking about surface level changes, we're talking about changes from the inside out that will lead to transformation. We're talking about renewing our minds, we're talking about changing the patterns of our thinking, creating new pathways in our brain that gives us the opportunity to be less stressed and more fulfilled. Okay. And that requires for us to do the soul work. What is your soul? Your soul is your mind, your will, your emotions, your motives, your intentions, your beliefs, your core values. Your soul may feel kindred to my soul, but they are not identical. Just like our core values are not identical, our beliefs will not be identical, even if we are both Bible believing Christians that live a daily life of following Jesus Christ. Our beliefs are still not going to be identical. Our souls are unique to us, just like our fingerprints. Okay? So I want you to remember this. Your soul work does not look like my soul work. If you're reading my book, you will see what my soul work looks like. In that book, I'm just sharing with you my journey and giving you some tips on how to go about this journey and to do it semi successfully, because none of us will fully arrive, okay? But in that soul work right now, in this phase, this week, let's focus on identifying our masks. If I say to you, how are you? And your response is, I'm exhausted or I'm tired. What else is there, y'all? That's not just a one thing. That is that is the fruit, and there is most definitely a root of cause. Is it fear? Is it anxiety? Okay? Is it overworking? Is it stress? I want you to take the time to really drill down what that actually is. I want you to name it and tame it, okay? Find out what the actual emotions are that are tied to that exhaustion. Once you're able to identify it, then you can name it. And I want you to say that out loud. And I want you to talk to yourself, whether through journaling or in a mirror session. I want you to talk to yourself about why you're feeling that way. And if you don't know, just acknowledge it. Don't beat yourself up. Don't stress yourself out. Just acknowledge it. Now I see you. I know what you are. Fear of rejection, fear of failure. I see you. Okay? Then take action. Think about what it would look like to release just one of those masks, performances of survival, this week. Let's not jump ahead the next 3 weeks. Right now, this week, no matter how small or minute it may seem, it could be something as simple as pretending to be someone that you're not in whatever situation. When someone says to you, good morning, how are you? And your response is, I'm fine, I'm good, no complaints. I want you to stop and take a moment and consider the soul work that you're doing and genuinely think about the proper response. Now, granted, if you're at the grocery store or the gas station, you can't say I'm exhausted because my marriage is toxic and it's draining the life out of me. I get that. However, there are ways that you can be more socially acceptable and still be honest, y'all. I've seen better days. I am a little tired. However, I am hopeful. I know it sounds like a lot, y'all, but if you're willing to put that work in for yourself, how much more fruitful and beneficial that would be to your life than you putting all that extra in for other people. Just a thought. All right, sis, you made it through week one's training. Say it with me. I am not my mask. I am not my trauma. I am not my performance. I am a whole woman worthy of rest, reciprocity, and restoration. And I want you to remember, y'all, and we'll deal with this later. A lot of these masks that we're wearing are, in fact, trauma responses. So that is something that I want you all to keep in mind, that as you're doing soul work, you're also doing trauma healing. Okay? Now, remember, this week, we are identifying, we are developing worth beyond the mask, okay? And we are acknowledging our needs. Most of the time, those needs look like boundaries, okay? Remember, boundaries are for us, they're not to manipulate the other person. They look like boundaries. They look like genuine care and concern. They look like positivity and light. They look like love. spiritual love, right? Sometimes it's so hard to love ourselves that we have to remind ourselves of how much we are loved, how much Jesus loves us, because that love never changes, never ridicules us for making mistakes, never disappoints us. It's always the same, yesterday, today, and forever, y'all. So hold on to that. I encourage you to hold on to that and think about all of this. I want you to work with the worksheet that has been given to you earlier this week. I will be posting later in the week. You will receive affirmations specific to this week, a list of 10. And I will see you all on the live. At least come to the live and or the group coaching session with at least identifying one mask that you are willing to start with removing and where you think it came from. All right, I will talk to y'all soon. This is Coach Nikki Cates. Be blessed, be empowered, and choose to be happy, my sister. I love you.